Good evening. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, November 19th, and I'll call the special meeting of the Brookfield Board of Education to order.
And this will be the regular meeting of the Municipal Building Committee.
Thank you all for attending. Again, this is our third and final public engagement forum for the municipal project. We are still in the schematic design phase, where we are taking the design of the school and through input from educators, from planners, from the community. We're refining it to make it a school for our community, for Brookfield. So we are grateful that everyone is here to add input. We're going to follow approximately the same format we did before, and to describe the format and to share the agenda, I will turn it over to Tecton Architects.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes. I hope. Good. All right, thank you. Hi, I'm Eddie Wadowski. I'm a project manager with Tecton Architects. I'll talk to you a little bit about the agenda for this evening. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the school building and the site. About a 30-minute presentation, depends on how long-winded I go. Might be a little bit more than that. I tend to like to talk as architects. We'll give you an opportunity for questions and answers about the design of the project. And then after that, we'll do a separate discussion for the parcel where Erickson Farm is. Basically, just give everybody an opportunity to talk about the school first before we get into the site. And then we'll be available for informally to answer questions and talk to you afterwards. So, agenda for this evening. First thing we'll do is tell you a little bit about what we've been up to recently. We'll show you very quickly what sort of the evolution of the previous designs for the site were, and then we're going to show you the meat of the presentation is on the current design. So we're going to have overall floor plans, some detailed plans on specific areas so you can see the adjacencies and the function of how everything works. We'll show you site plans, how the building addresses concerns over safety and security for the students, and then we're going to get into the massing of the building, show you three-dimensional views, exterior, what some of the materials might be, and some interior views as well. And then we'll talk to you a little bit about student welfare, primarily on sustainability, tell you where we're headed after this. So recently we've had a few meetings. Mostly we've been doing a lot of fact gathering over the past few months, and now we've really been taking it internally, synthesizing everything that we've heard into the design. We have continued to meet with a few key staff folks, principals, grade level teachers, some of the specialists, Board of Ed staff, to make sure that everything that we've heard that's actually been translated into the plans in a way that's pleasing. Key activities, so we've had a number of activities that have been going on. Primarily, we've really been trying to get to the bottom of a number of site issues, working with the town officials to try and determine the best way to get gas and sewer and water to the property. As I mentioned, working with our engineers to get everything technically that we need to into the building. Recently, the traffic survey was done, so we've been doing the counts for the number of vehicles that are going to be coming to the site. And now that the building footprint is starting to get a little more solidified, we're going to be proceeding with taking some borings so we understand what the design criteria is for the foundation of the building. So very quickly, this is the initial design that was part of the grant application to the state. It was a fairly blocky sort of building. It kind of synthesized as we interviewed for the project, and this was a scheme that people seemed to like, where we separated things into two bars, really the front bar being mostly administration and assembly spaces, and the classrooms towards the rear. Two different concepts that were explored as we tried to get 3 wings of classrooms instead of 2 in the back. And basically this was kind of a synthesized version. There were some things that were liked about each of the 2 previous schemes. So we kind of took half of one and half of the other, and that's been the basis of what we've been moving forward with. So, current design. Again, we've tried to keep essentially the administration and assembly spaces up at the front. Classrooms, 3 classroom wings, a 2-story building. For the most part, what you see, the lower half of the plan is really 1 story, although the mass of the building is taller. Because most of the spaces you see in the gym, spaces such as that are going to be a double height space. So when you look at the building, it's not going to look taller necessarily from one to the other, although we have a piece in front that you'll see that essentially that lowest bar stays a little bit lower so that there's a little bit of a stepping to the building. Essentially, what we're really trying to do is make sure that, that there's the whole concept was to have a sense of openness so that when you came in either of the 2 entrances, one on the left for pre-K to 2 and then on the right for 3rd through 5th grade, was that there was a nice vista out to beyond. The topography of the site slopes up, there's a nice hillside in the distance, and so we wanted to have a really glassy experience as you came through, and exciting views in the distance, and also exciting spaces on the sides of you. And what we're really trying to do is find ways of kind of breaking down barriers, so intentionally you see there's really no wall there. We're hoping that, you know, we'll have the ability with some operable partitions to close spaces off if need be, but really have, you know, the function of the building open to folks as they're walking past and really energize the experience. Upstairs, so you see, again, the rear is the 2-story piece, taking advantage of the fact that we do have, you know, a double volume here, and there are some more utilitarian spaces in the back, so getting some spaces along there. Essentially, we have a few of the spaces like art and world language and special education. We really need to have a component that's for the younger students and for the older students, so we're essentially trying to replicate them on each floor so that travel distance is minimized. So now a few enlarged plans. So this is kind of the right side, lower right side of the plan. Idea is you come in here, we have the administration for the older students on that side, a combined nurse suite, so both nurses next to each other, psychologists and social work next to them. You'll see that a little better on the next plan. 2 music rooms, practice rooms, sufficient storage for them, both of them opening onto a multi-purpose space that's primarily used throughout the day for fitness, but could also be used after hours or before school as performance space or rehearsal space for the band. Again, so the idea being the instruments are right there, make it nice and convenient to be able to go into that space. The stage that's double-sided can open either to the multi-purpose or to the cafeteria, potentially a divider going across the cafeteria. Idea being trying to give maximum flexibility in terms of public performances. In the lower right, you see primarily utilitarian areas. We're looking at a screen wall here to kind of segregate the loading area and the trash and dumpsters. Deliveries would come in here, down the utilitarian corridor, and deliveries could be distributed throughout the building from there. And a staff dining. Nice little space to maybe get out of the classroom and come and interact with the rest of the faculty close to the main administration area. So moving over the other half of the plan, so now you see the rest of the nurses area. The layout here is essentially fairly similar. The administration for the younger students coming through here, similar to the gym, very glassy, open areas for the fitness, for the library and media center. And one of the things we've been talking about that's seemed to have gained a lot of popularity is the idea of creating a second cafeteria, realizing that we're going to have nearly 1,300 students here. We need to have a way to, even with 3 lunchways, it's 430 or so kids. It's tough to seat everybody all at once, so we're looking at trying to have multiple areas. So the idea of kind of a third of them here and then a third each in the 2 halves of the main cafeteria. Everything would be cooked in the main cafeteria and brought in insulated carts. Refrigerators for cold drinks would be kept permanently in the space, but essentially something to where the younger students, oh boy, there we go. So that the younger students, again, we've heard it from the teachers that the biggest gift that we can give them is the gift of time. And the amount of time that's lost in transitions as they're walking to and from spaces inside the building, really the more we can do to minimize that really allows them maximum time of teaching. Pre-kindergarten, 2 pre-kindergarten classes, and 4 of the 10 kindergarten classes are located up front. And the way we've done this for all of these rooms is basically a pairing, so that there's a shared toilet room, a connecting corridor, storage that's used for both classrooms, and then a breakout space. So if there's a need to take a student or a group of students and kind of be in somewhere a little more private, it's just one of the things that the teacher said would be very flexible for them as they go throughout the day. The typical classroom neighborhood is what we've been referring to. So essentially this represents a grade cluster, be it 3rd, 4th, 5th. We haven't really figured out exactly which grades are going to go where, but you see 10 classrooms. Within each of them, there's a dedicated area, a resource area, a speech, multifunction that can be used for testing, and a number of different functions on the special ed spectrum. Teachers' workrooms, storage, basically trying to have a hub in each neighborhood so that the teachers aren't having to go very far to be able to do some of the functions that need to be done on a one-on-one basis with the students. And then you see up at the top, the idea is we're looking at ways of making the classrooms flexible in terms of the ends, perhaps having some overhead doors or operable partitions to be able to have the classes spill out into a breakout area to try and kind of break down the walls of the traditional learning environment and more collaborative spaces. We are looking at potentially an enclosed pedestrian bridge connecting the wings between the north and central wings. It would be an open bridge between south and central, as we don't see there being quite as much activity on that one, just because of the grade levels. So, take you through the site plan. So, apologize, we've rotated the building. In this case, north is up. So, Candlewood Lake Road to the east side is still going to be the primary entrance and exit for the school. Looking at creating a dedicated turning lane here to help alleviate concerns over traffic in Candlewood Lake. Buses would end here on the loop and basically come out that way. Parent drop-off would be in this direction. Visitor parking, faculty parking. Kind of take you through some of the key pieces in terms of security. So by having the admin out here nice in front, they have a great view of the entire site and anyone that might be approaching. Parent bus drop-off, as I mentioned. Your visitor parking. Basically, making sure that everything is a nice, safe distance from the school, so that if there is something that happens, there's time to respond. There's a little bit of an inherent safety in having a distance between those activities in the school. And basically using the school to kind of create secure areas so that there's all sorts of places for play yards, be they formal, informal, playground, having spaces immediately adjacent to the school where you can go out through a door and be able to use them. And then coming from Nabby Road, basically down there, it's a farm parcel and emergency access that would be used only in case of need from first responders. Translating the building, it's the same 6 points. The visibility from the administration, secure vestibules at the entrances. Compartmentalization, so basically there's no classrooms at the front of the building. They're all kind of buffered and behind, so that there's time to address any potential emergencies that pipe up. Secure neighborhoods that are on the back side of that. Protected outdoor classrooms. And again, a good separation of public and private space so that the building can be compartmented off, so that it can be used for after-hours activities, be it Parks and Rec using some of the fitness spaces, or for voting, or for any other public events that are going to happen. There's ways of making sure that everybody gets to use basically all the public amenities of the building, the cafeteria, the gym, the lockers, the showers, the toilets, without having to have the ability to wander through the rest of the building. Talk to you briefly about the Navy Road Erickson Farm parcel. What we're looking at here is there is, on paper, there's evidence of a road that used to be on the south side of the site, trying to take advantage of that. Basically kind of replicate a path. It's really, when I say a road or a path, it's really going to be an access, a gravel road, nothing paved, nothing permanent. Creation of 2 new 60-foot baseball fields. The idea is really trying to minimize the development there. Essentially just the infields is what you would see. And then to create a walking path that creates a loop off of the access way so that there's nice amenities for the neighborhood to be able to come and use the space. We hope that this would be used by the students, for coming out for extending that classroom environment into the natural world. And with that, turn it over to my colleague Ernest, who's going to take you through the fun part of the design.
Good evening. So we wanted to just go through we're going to go through some real rough concepts or starting concepts. You saw the plans, and these massings really support where we were at that point in stage of the development of the plan. So as Eddie mentioned, there's the front is really single story, which is administration as well as the pre-K, K classroom wings over to the left, and then the massing where it takes on much more verticality is really towards the back where we've got the gymnasium and the rest of the support of the program with the classrooms. This was one of our early sketches, thinking we could incorporate a green roof, but that we really wanted to incorporate a kind of organic feel using natural woods, a lot of glass where we can use the glass, but use it in a real strategic way where we're bringing glass into the inset gymnasium on the east face, and more of the public zones where we've got the administration. Glass would be more punch windows, again for security and safety, as well as for the pre-K and K, the front portion of the building where the windows would be much smaller. They'd be punch windows that would be different sizes in different locations. So not a lot of big expansive glass right up in front. So again, this was an early concept, and then we've moved into just kind of massing the model using where we are with floor plans and seeing how that starts to mass in model form with hard lines, and you could start to see where we're taking advantage of windows with the gymnasium right here, as well as the allocation of the punch windows for the administration, where we've got pre-K and K, and that would be much more varied. But that kind of stepping, that layering of the building is really key. It's really important in how we use the amount of glass and openness. This was an earlier rendering that we showed towards the backside, so you're up on the hill looking down into what could be the outdoor learning classrooms, the 3 classroom wings. Again, we'd like to express this using materials. So we're looking at materials that really expresses the nature of the building as well as the site. The breakout spaces at the end of the corridors where the kids could break out from their classrooms, the hubs there, and really express the idea of openness and looking out into the nature. This is, again, a white massing model study of that same view. Our connectors, our bridges that connect the upper elementary, our setback corridor. We're playing with roof forms right now, thinking that If we are applying PV panels, that those would naturally tilt up with the roofs. And then where we've got this tilting up, there's north light that allows some of that natural daylight to diffuse into the corridors of those classroom wings. So it's a nice way to bring in natural daylight with a double loaded core. Another rendering, you can see the concept with the pitched roofs along the south side. The idea that we could array the PV panels on the flat roof sections where we've got the gymnasium and the media center. A similar view with the white massing models. And then we've got some 2D elevations that we've been studying as so we wanted to distinguish the pre-K to K entry with the 3 to 5, and so this entry would be lower, more to scale with the young ones. You can see so that's more like a one-story entry. And then we're studying placement of windows again, that being a much more intricate pattern and more playful. Not sure what the massing would be if we're looking at stone, even CMU block, some type of brick, maybe field stone. So we're still exploring the idea of materiality. That really, if we'd love to bring in again that idea of natural materials and using maybe rusticated stone or doing something playful with brick. And that would be in contrast with the lighter material. Maybe it's a cedar panel, maybe it's a cement board, but something that gives it a much more light and airy feeling using some natural tones, like earth tones. So the entry for 3 to 5 would be much taller, so much more differently distinguished than the pre-K to K entry. With the admin wing, with the admin off to the right side, the nurses, health, and admin for pre-K to K on the left side. So again, the punch windows, really limiting the amount of window space for that. Expanding it for visibility for admin to see who's coming along the bus drop-off and parent drop-off. And then really taking advantage of that entry with the double height space. On the backside, you can see the 3 wings, and really starting to play with the idea of the contrast of materials using maybe that masonry or stone on one side of the wing with the other type of material, whether it be wood or cement board. And then the glass. Again, these are the sections where we've got the breakout spaces, so end of the corridor, really bringing in a lot of that natural daylight and being able to see out into the hill towards the west. This is a view looking down as you walk in the main lobby for 3 to 5 entry. We've got the gymnasium over to the left, and then the music room and the practice rooms over to the right. Those again are just one story, so we're taking advantage of bringing natural daylight in on the north side, really creating a dramatic space, an activated space. Being able to see inside the gymnasium, so a lot of nice activity going on here. Bringing possibly that wood feel up into the ceiling, and keeping this really open. The bridge beyond would be the classroom wings, getting to the classrooms, the center wing with the north wing. The multi-purpose room, as we talked about, there'll be a double-sided stage, so this will be a part fitness room as well as multi-purpose, where maybe a more intimate performance could be done here. The opening over there would be connected to the music classrooms that are adjacent to the multipurpose. So really flexible space here where the function of the music room could really share the expansiveness of coming into the multipurpose space for practice performances. And then windows that look out into the main public corridor as well. So a lot of activity that's really being visible with these spaces. And then taking advantage of the 2-story height space. And then we started playing around with envisioning how it would feel differently in the pre-K, K1 wing. The gross motor skills space is right to your right, with the media center to your left. The gross motor skills connects with the gymnasium, so there's a possibility that there's a door that opens into the gymnasium, so further flexibility could be had joining those 2 spaces. But that's their corridor that leads you out, that you look down into the outside courtyard from here, but really starting to be more playful with the architecture in this side of the school. Just envisioning with your typical corridors that there could be breakout seating for the students. Having that expansive glass that looks out into the courtyards, we feel is key, that there's nature throughout, and we want to take advantage of the space. Using bold colors, graphics, the use of wood throughout the space. And maybe a visioning of what the breakout spaces could be when you're not in your classroom and a teacher wants to come out, or a couple teachers want to bring in a couple classes out into the corridor, and there's additional breakout space with whiteboards and digital display, and then again views out into the courtyard. And I will hand this over to Antonia and Brett.
Good evening. My name is Brad Park. I'm with Consulting Engineering Services in Middletown. We are the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection engineers for the project, working with Tecton Architects. What we have here is a long list of ideas, but really what we're trying to look at for this building is sustainability concepts. And when we say sustainability, we're looking at ways to improve energy efficiency, but also take into account indoor air quality, long-term lifespan of the building, maintenance, and other needs the building has. So we have a laundry list of ideas here, but really what this is trying to show is everything's on the table. So we're looking at ideas that are more routine for us nowadays, but also ideas that are progressive in energy efficiency. So we've highlighted a few things. Everything in yellow are things that we're very confident are things we can incorporate into this facility, and things we've incorporated in other facilities similar to yours. So things such as LED lighting is becoming common nowadays and can really provide good benefits in reduced energy for lighting. We're going to look at a high performance envelope. So as the engineering team, we're going to work very closely with Tecton to determine how the envelope can affect the mechanical systems of the building. The tighter that we make the envelope, the more efficient we make the envelope, the more efficient the mechanical systems for the building can be. And right now we're looking at, we can evaluate different envelopes and determine how they affect, what effects they have on the building. Plumbing fixtures, low flow plumbing fixtures, energy recovery ventilators. So what that means is we can recover energy from the air we're taking out of the building and insert it into the air we're pulling into the building for ventilation, improving indoor air quality. Solar photovoltaic. We all know solar panels are very popular these days, so we can evaluate that. And it's something that can be done at this stage, or it can be done down the road by the school after the fact, and we can design for it either way. High efficiency water heaters, boilers, things of this, that really can help us reduce the energy usage of these appliances. So now I'll turn it over to Antonia, who will speak a little bit more about the indoor air quality and indoor environment of the building.
Hi, good evening. So what we've been focused on from the get-go is how these environments impact the students and the teachers and the community, everyone in the space, how we can support 21st century learning and improve the health and well-being of the building occupants. And it just so happens that there's a way to do that. It's called the WELL Building Standard. And the great thing about WELL is it's not only a sustainable building standard, but it's health-based, it's evidence-based, and at its core, it's for people. It takes into account public health data and applies it to your building to analyze how you can improve the well-being of folks in the space. But the great thing about our process, the design process, is that it's not just about sustainability, it's not just about health, it's not just about resiliency, it's really a holistic view of all of these things together. So WELL and LEED are not that far apart from each other. And in fact, they've teamed up to create these things called crosswalks that are going to allow the benefits of LEED and the benefits of WELL to work together to effectively get you the best of a built environment for health and well-being of people, and a green building that's going to reduce emissions, be more energy efficient, and reduce carbon footprint. So some of those credits, so of the 57 credits in LEED, there are 37 crosswalks available, and that will get you about a third of the way to WELL building certification, if you choose to certify. Again, you can just incorporate a lot of these concepts and have a healthy building for occupants. But the benefit is there to combine. And what that looks like is, I just highlighted one example. So this is a crosswalk example for some of the indoor air qualities that Brad was talking about. So LEED wants you to look at carbon dioxide and measure that. And WELL is actually a little bit more technical on this point. It wants you to look at carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, a few others, ozone. So there are some really fun advantages to combining both of these, and that's something that Brad and I and the team will be looking at to make sure that this building is as healthy, as powerful as it can be for the folks inside the space.
Okay. Everybody still awake, I hope? Darkened room, people talking to you for a while. All right, so this is the last piece, just to kind of tell you where we are in the scheme of things. So obviously, we're still in further refinement of the building massing, and as Ernest mentioned, trying to really determine what are the right materials to be using for the outside and for the inside of the building. A little bit more refinement of the site plan as we start to get a little bit more information on the fields and starting to kind of soften up the parking and the experience for people who are dropping off kids and how that progression from the vehicular areas to the building works itself out. Big piece here is making sure we're kind of getting towards the latter part of our initial phase of design, schematic design, and so we owe an estimate to the town to prove that we are still, the design that we're showing is on track to meet the projected budget. So we'll be working with our estimator to get him the documents he needs to be able to price everything, and then if there are overages, work on ways of bringing the project back into compliance. Going through the site due diligence, as I mentioned earlier, we're about halfway through or so with the traffic and the geotechnical for the borings. Our site engineer from Darren Overton from Malone McBroom is here this evening if you have questions. He's can speak to some of the particulars on this. He's been coordinating in terms of, as I mentioned, getting the site utilities to the project, working with the town in terms of the Wetlands Commission, and then with the state and national for FEMA and making sure that everything we do is in concert with the floodplain requirements. And then finally, making sure that we've had initial meetings. We've had quite a few meetings throughout the grant process with the state, and starting to get to that next level to make sure that they're on board with everything we're doing, to make sure that the town gets maximum reimbursement for the design. So that's the conclusion of the prepared part of the presentation. We certainly open it up to questions at this point. Happy to go back to any slides that we showed. We have other slides from past presentations as well. If there are questions that need answering with some of those visuals, we're happy to bring them up. Put the light back on. All right, so how does this go?
So at this point, we'll take questions and answers regarding the building presentation part of it. So if anyone does have any input, either comments, questions, answers, please come up just to get state name and address for the record. So do we have anyone at all who would like to have input? Yes, please.
I'm going to try to bring it to you as much as I can.
Set the mic stand down.
So again, just his name and address, and would like to keep comments and input at 3 minutes, please.
I'm Marcia Wilkins. I live at 56 Waxman Road. And I had some questions about energy use in the building. When you touched on utilities, bringing in gas, for instance, and then in the last part, sustainability, you also mentioned photovoltaic, and geothermal was also on the list. So I imagine this is too soon to know about those things, but I just wondered what the plan was as far as evaluating as far as cost and what's suitable site and where if energy modeling has been done. Yeah, I imagine there is soon there. But those are questions I had for long term.
Yeah, actually, Aaron? Second, just, did you respond to, the appropriate time for energy modeling and that thing?
So energy modeling in general, we actually have already started that process.
Everyone in here can hear you, but the people at home
Or he's
cannot.
going to put some mic.
It hasn't sounded loud enough for the presentation.
So, the microphone you're saying is not loud enough?
I don't think so. What does everybody think? Moved it?
Okay, I'll speak
Go
up.
ahead.
So energy modeling is actually something we've already begun the process of, and the reason being is we want to be able to evaluate how different systems and how different M-type wall types and roof insulation and things like that can affect the design of the project. And one of the things that we're looking at is cost. So if we increased the insulation on the wall, there's obviously a cost associated with that, but is there return on investment? So we've begun the energy modeling process already. It's rough at this point. We're really trying to get order of magnitude, and as we finalize the floor plan and move into detailed design, we'll move forward further and refine these concepts. You're absolutely right. At this point, there's a lot of different concepts on the table, and we're trying to evaluate each and every one of them and if they'll have a positive impact for this project or if they're suitable.
Thanks, thank you.
Hello everyone, Darren Overton from Mylona McBroom. Not sure there was much in relation to your question on the site, but we are working with the architects to orient the building to minimize the impacts regarding grading, impact on wetlands, as far as the existing utilities and drainage on the site. We are also working with the orientation and working with information from CES regarding mechanical loading to bring utilities to the site that are properly sized. Plan is to extend a new gas main to the site to serve for heating for the building. Public water is in the works to be extended to the building, and we're looking at also, our traffic engineers looking at site circulation. You saw the layout for the parking lots with a separate bus loop and a drop-off loop for parents. We want those separated because for safety reasons and circulation, there'd be a central spine walkway to bring the students into the school and for parents to also access the two main entrances. And if there are any other site-related questions, I'd be happy to answer those. We're working to put together the concepts, which will then advance into the design development plans that you'll see submitted as part of the local land use applications.
Thanks.
Any other questions in relation?
My name is Henry Catras, 19 Rocky Road, Brookfield. I've been going to all the NBC meetings for about the last 6 months, so I understand what was going on as far as the RFPs and so on. A couple of questions. Are building materials certified to be frac waste free? Will those certificates be on file and available for us to review? How secure is the back of the building? Great that you have a front view, but what about the back of it? What's going to happen there? Also, as far as solutions, energy solutions, they keep talking about sustainability, but the building, as it is right now, faces north-south. For outcome energy harvest, the building should be more or less south. The building faces east-west, and it should be more or less south and north. Most of it being north in order to optimize energy harvest. Of course, there's going to be some other consideration, understood, but at least give it an effort. Also, as far as energy solutions, it seems like natural gas, which I like to call poison gas, because it has consequences that we don't talk about. Geothermal is off the table. It looks like it's one of the darkened items as opposed to one of the yellow items. And we do have experts who, can tell us that net zero energy schools are a way to go, especially if we're thinking long-term and we're thinking in terms of the planet. And also our children, because ultimately our children are going to be learning from us as to how to take care of our planet and all life on it. So when you talk costs, I suggest that we also put on the table the consequences of using the solutions we currently have, which is natural gas. There's a cost to that. Okay, the poison air, water, and soil that we have to use, as well as the health effects. Okay, there's a number to that. It's not just a price at the pump. Thank you. So when you make your assumptions, okay, please include those in your costing assumptions, or the energy envelope that you call it.
Thank you.
My name is Bill Doyle. I live at 17 Powderhorn Hill in Brookfield. First, thank you for having these meetings and allowing us to hear all the different plans. The first plan that I attended, there was a lot of talk of ease of access for students and staff, and mention of the playgrounds. I don't know in the last picture of the last diagram they had there how many elevators are planned, but if we could plan for at least 2 for ease of access. As an educator in a high school that has about 1,200 students, we have 1 working elevator, and when it is out of order, it plays a big issue for many students and staff. If we could also consider a space for the staff, all right? I think it's well appreciated that their opinions matter and the ideas of planning this great building that you have presented in front of us, but they should also have space too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, any other input, comments in regards to the building site?
mind if we ask a question from the board? I noticed.
You gotta be up at the, mic.
Name and address.
I got to be made my bad. So Bob Belden, 7 Red Barn Lane. As I look at the plan as it's moved forward and the parking is out front, I keep thinking about the elevations that are out here today and the fact that this school is where it is. Have we thought through how we're going to get the parking lots built for the new school while we're still occupying this school? And how will that whole transition work? Because I can see that as we move that closer and closer this way, that becomes a challenging juggle. So that's the only input I just asked you to think about.
I'm sorry?
Do you want me to address that?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, the answer. Sorry. Sure. Yeah, I mean, so, I wasn't quite sure if that.
Sure, no, that was.
Jeff Kuzinski, Principal, Tech Architects. So great question. Site phasing and logistics have been always part of the conversations. As the design evolves, we're going to have to work on kind of what that looks like with current operations. Now that we have our OPM on board as well, our CADIS, the entire team is going to look at site phasing and logistics. I mean, safety is obviously primary concern during the construction, and then figure out how to do it kind of in between, either during the summer or after construction. So the answer is yes, it's involved in every conversation we have relative to the site, and we'll have more kind of phasing and logistics plans.
Is there a lot of grading going to be required?
Up front, there'll be a fair amount, yeah. I mean, I think generally speaking, and correct me if I'm wrong, the proposed elevation of the new building will be more or less what's out there in the field that you see today, maybe a little bit higher. So we need to kind of look at in more detail the area out over on the left side, and then I guess right outside the gym as it that drops down in topography for the play field. So there'll be more up here than there is back there. But yes, we're looking at that as well. Ultimately, we want to have a balanced site so that we're kind of just moving things around but not taking anything on and off the site.
Colette, did you want me to respond to some of the other questions?
If they haven't been responded to, sure.
Let's try and do what I can from memory.
Okay. Elevators?
Yeah, elevators. So yeah, right now there is one elevator planned. I think it's a good point that you're bringing up about, with the size of the school, that perhaps the second one makes some sense. So, that's something, of course, cost comes into it, but something we should definitely take a look at as we go forward. In terms of space for the staff, yeah, definitely. I mean, some of the plans that we have up here tonight are a little more detailed than anything anybody's seen, our detailed programming meetings. So yeah, the next round is to get back together with everybody we've met with and say, okay, this is the interpretation of it. What are we missing, or how well does it respond? I think that was your question, right? Yes?
Ease of access.
Oh, ease of access. In terms of playgrounds, yeah, I mean, definitely we're getting into, as we've had kind of some bigger pressing concerns on the site end of things, but yeah, trying to understand, I think it's time to start developing the play yards outside the building and really starting to look, as I said, sort of holistically at the landscape design for the project. Great. Okay.
And then we had the others that were energy concerns.
Energy concerns, yeah, let's see. So the orientation of the building, the classroom wings are still oriented in the way that we want them to. Some of the administrative areas and assembly areas are not, but to some degree, some of those are, a little bit landlocked, with more solid walls, but we are trying to be sensitive to how Ernest spoke about that a bunch about in terms of the location of the fenestration so that we have it oriented in a way that does capture natural light in the way that is best. Let's see, there was...
Geothermal.
Thank you. Yeah, geothermal, correct me if I'm wrong, geothermal is not off the table, right, by any stretch? We're still looking at that as a number of different pieces.
It's grayed out on your list.
You want to? Yeah, go ahead. You can say why. Yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize if the yellow versus the gray was maybe a little bit misleading. The yellow items were things that we thought were fairly easy to incorporate, that didn't need a lot of, big buy-in to get those things accomplished. Geothermal is absolutely on the table. There's obviously an upfront cost to that, and we have to evaluate how it fits, as you spoke about. But it's not off the table. It's something we'll evaluate. It's something we'll look into further. And if it makes sense for this particular project, we're more than happy to design it. We just need to make it work within the the confines of our requirements. So it absolutely can still be evaluated.
And also how secure will the back be?
How secure will the back? Yeah, actually, that's a great point. We do need to take a look at that. One of the things that I did not mention, we created a secondary admin area up on the second floor. The idea being that, so the principals would be downstairs, but having the assistant principals, because it's such a large school, we wanted to have another point of control, so to speak. So having someone that can monitor that, but we do, it's a good point, trying to take a look at, because it is fairly open back there. I think most people would be coming from Candlewood Lake Road, so I think there's, great buffer zones, if you will, before you get to the back, but it's certainly something we can look at going forward. Let's see, net zero is certainly on the table. We are still working towards that. We're looking at trying to determine what the best method is for the envelope of the building, really trying to improve the insulative value to try and get our energy usage down as far as possible, and hopefully use PV to offset whatever the energy loads are. As far as gas, we are looking at alternative means of powering the building. It's not necessarily natural gas. That seems to be the leading contender, but it's a good point you bring up. There was something about chain of materials certification and whether.
Yes.
Be on file.
Crack
Yeah.
waste free certification.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we can make sure that gets in the specifications, and I think all the stuff should be a matter of public record.
I think it's all.
Yep.
It's all over here.
Okay, good.
Thank you for bringing this up.
Okay, just, can't hear your video if you're not.
Okay. Debbie Brooks, 21 Crestview Drive. I just had a couple questions regarding the multipurpose room that has the stage. In this school, like when we have the school play here, it's nice that this multipurpose room is right near the front door. There's not a lot of traffic in the hallways. You can exit this way and that way. So in the latest plans, it looks like that multipurpose room was back a little bit, past the music rooms and the rehearsal rooms. So I would just say, could you give some thought to flipping that so that there's easy access from the parking lot, and 500 people coming to the spring play can get out without getting lost in the hallways. I really love the idea of the cafeteria for the kindergarten and first graders, the added cafeteria on that side. And I was curious if that will also double as like a multi-purpose room.
Yes, that was the intent.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay, good. And my last question is about parking, because I feel like at least at Center School and here and Wisconsin, whenever there's parent-teacher conferences or a play or whatever, parking is a nightmare. So I'm sure there's a formula for square footage of the building, number of students in the building, and how many spaces that requires. And I would say add 20% to that. So those are just my comments. Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you want to address parking?
You want this parking?
So parking is always an interesting question to answer. we do look at, for elementary schools, the amount of parking based on the number of students. And I don't remember the ratio that we use, but we also try to look for flexible space outside of that for events. So it's difficult to, or it's really not good practice to design for your biggest event and have a sea of parking that's only used maybe once or twice a year. Particularly for stormwater management and water quality, you have a lot of pavement that generally will generate more pollutants, so you want to kind of minimize the amount of impervious surface. But we look at options for overflow parking for larger events and whether there's any adjacency uses sometimes that we look at that could potentially handle overflow. In this neighborhood, it doesn't seem to be a lot of adjacency where there's options. So, but we can certainly look for overflow parking where we're maybe not paving parking spaces, but considering alternative materials for that.
Do we have anyone else?
I had another question.
All right.
Just a thought. So, and this is a Bob Belden, 7 Red Barn Lane again. And I'm not going to talk about the Erickson property, so this is a different question about fields. But in the original plan, right near the school, there was there were some fields, there was a soccer style field and there was a baseball field on our original schematics. And I didn't see any of those in the pictures we saw. And I don't know if there were plans in there to use that space between the driveways or on either side for any sort of outdoor, flat, open space for kids to do, whether it's kickball or soccer or whatever. Because kids do outdoor gym, if you will. So are there plans in that schematic on the main property for fields?
Not on the main property, part of what's materialized. So part of what's materialized, Bob, and I know during some of our Friday morning meetings with the chair, the iterations have gone through. Once we started bringing the ingress and egress off Candlewood Lake Road, that area became narrow and the grading between it became a challenge. So you indicated before how the site slopes down, and we know how it slopes down.
That's right where it is.
And exactly. So what we ended up with was a portion that's closest to Candlewood Lake Road. That's probably the most viable, but not the best location. And that's why, at this point, we've changed a little bit of direction with that ingress and egress coming off Candlewood Lake Road for other opportunities and other options, to have the play areas, the individual play areas outside of each of the classrooms, but the large flat areas are going to be a subject of, for sure.
So
some
it wouldn't
discussion
be
later
on
on.
this part of the property?
Right, that's correct.
Okay, that was the question.
Mark and Jengro, 11 Rachel Farm Road. Just 3 quick questions, very brief. What is the life expectancy for the design that you guys are implementing, namely the window walls? I can know the CMU block, obviously, it's going to last a lot longer. If you're doing 50% window walls, do they have to plan on replacing them 15, 20 years? What kind of costs would they be looking at for something like that? Secondly, I was just thinking a couple of meetings ago, whatever happened with the FEMA and the floodplain that was right out in front? I don't know if you came up with maybe some sort of culvert design or something. I'm just curious whatever happened with that.
Okay.
And lastly, just one more quick comment. Don't go too abstract with the designs and sole source anything. Drive your costs out of the roof. Just make sure we have a couple different vendors for each of them. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. What was your last name again?
Jennifer.
Okay, so on the window walls, great question, and it's a topic of conversation with our designers all the time in the office, and where to put the windows, how much, what kind of window, is it translucent, the R value of the window and as it relates to energy modeling. So all of that is analyzed in conjunction with the impact that it has on the energy consumption. So computer modeling has aided in this effort, but we also use common sense with proper placement and sun angles and solar orientation. So as a firm, as a team, we've really put sustainability at the forefront of our designs and being thoughtful about our approach, because it's not just like the type of glass, it's where the glass is, if it's shaded, if there's an overhang. So to answer your question in short, we're going to look at all life cycle costing, but also that piece of it is integrated into kind of the energy analysis and the design. So that's why we kind of work together as one on that piece. The sole sourcing piece is, unless there's kind of a written approval, basically, and Jack can tell you kind of verbatim with the state, but we need to have 3 or equal, and we spend a lot of time making sure that the specifications include 3 equal specifications, 3 equal manufacturers that have a very similar kind of product, if we're specifying that. So unless there's a specific system, or like building control sometimes has to be proprietary, but not often here, I think in this town, as far as standards. So that's something that we're working with Dan Caldwell on, and in the schools and NBC on trying to develop kind of a baseline standard, of which we'll have 3 or equal in it. And then on the FEMA floodplain, we did touch upon it quite a bit at the last presentation, went over kind of some of the findings. I won't speak to the technical piece, so Darren will come up and speak to kind of their analysis that they've been doing, but basically, from an architect's perspective, they've studied basically what's out there today as far as the culvert and the capacity of that culvert, and it's such that with some modest modifications that can be modified, and we can we can file for a FEMA floodplain amendment to reduce that, so that opens up that area. And as far as wetlands, that's been flagged with not only the experts from our team, but also in conjunction with the town. So a lot of site due diligence ongoing, and if Darren can fill in kind of the technical gaps, if I missed any. But that's the architect's version of it anyway.
I like it.
So through this process, Jeff has become an architect/engineer, and he covered it very well. The floodplain hasn't magically disappeared. It is still there. We did a study on the watersheds. The stream that comes in straight in from the north on the site, we've looked at the capacity of the pipe that's there. That is able to convey the 500-year storm, so therefore it doesn't contribute to the 500-year floodplain that's shown on the FEMA mapping. However, the one that comes in from the northwest, that pipe we have determined to be undersized. So the 500-year flow does not make it into that pipe. It doesn't have enough capacity, and therefore that's why FEMA has shown we believe FEMA has shown the floodplain there. We've looked at adding a 30-inch pipe. If it was parallel to that, we would be able to then have enough capacity to carry the floodplain through that pipe system, and therefore essentially eliminate the floodplain that's shown. As part of that process, we would actually need to go to FEMA and for them to officially approve the computations that we've done to eliminate the floodplain. So I, as the project engineer on this, I have to, in order to get the state funding for the school to go forward, I either have to sign a waiver that there is no floodplain that exists on the site that impacts the school, or I have to issue a floodplain certification that gets reviewed by DEP. So we are going to have a discussion very shortly with the DEP to confirm that process. We believe the process will be that we will file with FEMA to eliminate the floodplain, and then I wouldn't have to necessarily fill out the floodplain certification. We want DEP involved in the process. However, I want to make sure before I sign off on that waiver that once we get the FEMA certification that DEP is on board with that. So that's sort of the process that we've looked into, and we want to confirm that with the DEP regulatory staff.
I just want to recap what he just said, because it confuses me. So we're on it, we've studied it, and we're having meetings and rectifying it, so.
Anyone else?
If I may?
You have a little bit longer, yeah, it's 3 minutes around it. Got about 1 minute left in your 3 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd just like to add a couple of ideas. One of them is future-proofing, and another one is pre-greening. So if we can do things ahead of time, like putting in, let's say, conduit to the parking lot for electrical car connection for charging, I think that should be done. I mean, not that we need to ultimately implement it, but let's put it in place. You know, the ground's going to be dug up anyway. Also, I would like to, I look at the school as a learning laboratory for our young people, and ultimately whatever they learn, they'll take with them in their lives and champion that in their lives. So things like monitoring. There's tons of information about what the building is using in terms of energy production as well as energy usage. I personally, if such a thing happens as a lab, I personally would contribute additional money, which, by the way, Brookfield, here's your opportunity to collect more money for the school. I would contribute money towards such a lab, okay? So, you know, put your thinking caps on and, you know, make it better than what the current thinking is. Because this thing's going to last at least 50 years. I hope much more than that, at least 100. Okay, let's not waste our time. Let's do it right the first time. And above all, let's keep the carbon in the ground and take care of our planet and all life on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we actually are planning on doing monitoring to be able to use the school as a teaching tool, you know, how it operates and, you know, be able to adapt that into the curriculum. So absolutely, it's a great point. And yeah, as far as like charging vehicle stations, yeah, that's also, you know, we're in complete agreement that, yeah, you're digging up the soil, now's the time to do it. And make sure you put the infrastructure in for things like that now, because it's never going to be a cheaper time to do it. So.
Thanks, Eddie.
Anyone else? Okay, so we will go into the portion where we discuss the Erickson Farm issue. Do we want to have the slide up again? Okay, we got that?
We do.
All right, so if anyone would like to come up again, please state name, address.
Rocco Michelli, and it's 26 Maple Tree Road. This school has a 60-foot field and a 90-foot field, and then the only plan is to put two 60-foot fields.
Can you talk into the microphone
Sorry.
so everybody can hear?
Yep. The existing school has a 90-foot field and a 60-foot field, and there's only two 60-foot fields going into the Erickson property. So I was wondering what the plan was for adding a 90-foot field and a 60-foot field.
Just as bad as Bob.
You know, I really am. Sorry, Bob. So this was, you know, a subject of great concern to area residents, to the town at large. And the NBC, BOE, Board of Selectmen had a meeting on Friday, and through that meeting came out some very good ideas. And one of them is with that 90-foot field to potentially, and I use the word potentially because everything's still being studied, but to potentially locate it at West Kinnear. The portables will be coming down. And if you look at West Kinnear's property, you have the portables, you have this piece of property, and then there's two different maps. One shows West Kinnear's property actually coming back all the way and cutting back at an angle. The other one shows that parcel as a separate parcel, but it's still owned by the town. So there is a little bit of latitude, a little bit of wiggle room to place that 90-foot field back where that existing 60 is at the rear of the property. However, in doing that, there's an opportunity also to orient it east-northeast, which would be the proper way to orient the baseball field. So we are looking at the replication or the replacement of the 90-foot field, albeit it may be in a different location. But we're not looking to short the 90-foot field. We're just looking to locate it elsewhere. That answers your question.
My name is Robert Garava. I live at 4 Homestead Lane. And I've walked the property of Erickson, the beautiful pastures. I've walked them in all seasons. They're very pastoral. They're beautiful in all seasons. And my thoughts are going to be expressed to the town officials, which I want to share with you right now. Dear town officials, I am extremely concerned with any proposal to alter the natural composition of Erickson Park for development of Erickson Park as is a valuable asset to the town. Brookfield continues to lose much of its natural appeal to commercial, residential, municipal, and recreational development. The cost of developing this property would be excessive relative to the cost of maintaining its natural heritage. The people in the attending neighborhoods would directly experience the dire effects of developing Erickson Park, from increased traffic and chronic depletion of serenity. Overall, I am thoroughly convinced that the biggest losers in the development of Erickson Park would be the collective residents of Brookfield. I urge your opposition to alter the current natural composition of Erickson Park and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
My name is Rob Blick. I live at 131 Candlewood Lake Road. When I voted for this project, it seemed to make sense. It preserved, the fields in front, and I know the town needs a 90-foot and a 60-foot. My children have been through the baseball program and at the high school, but I asked a emailed question a couple weeks ago, didn't get a response. There are other sites other than the open space at Erickson. I know when the library was considering taking the horse field for their project, they had indicated that they could move that field, which is a rather large field, to the area behind the municipal center. And there was money associated with it. What I want to know is when you decided not to have the fields in front, I understand there were issues and perhaps one of the 60-foots could go there. Still, I don't know, but that wasn't really, we didn't get any details on the distances required. But my question is, if part of the library plan was to move a field, a full-size soccer field there, why couldn't that be the location of one of the 90-foots? I mean, there's certainly parking, there's lots of perfect reasons, and if it was considered, and there was a budget line, even though it was voted down, was that considered during this project? My other question is, I thought that at the last meeting, somebody attended, told me that that raised path that went through the wetlands was just going to be more of a dirt, unfinished area. Can you please clarify those two questions?
I'll clarify the first question, and then I'm going to ask Jeff Wazinski to clarify the second, as far as traversing wetlands and the types of construction available to do so, or lowering the road. First question is, Mr. Blick, we did receive an email, and we did respond to it. Would you tell me where that's posted?
It was sent to him.
Okay. Okay, we're sorry if you didn't see it or didn't receive it, but we did see it and respond that day. We took a cursory look so far. On Friday was when we met with a number of the residents of Belden Hill, and we took a look at potential areas to relocate the 90-foot diamond. And Wisconsin was brought up. We figured we would give that the first look and the first credence for a couple of reasons. One is, it's a school. Kids who use these fields are school kids. And it's a straight shot down 25 from the high school. So if you had a freshman game going on or a JV game at the same time as the varsity, the distance separation between the two. We had ample parking, and we don't have other townspeople coming there during a game, much like we would at Town Hall. Not to say that Town Hall is off the radar, but we thought that maybe Wiskaneer was a better first pass than the Town Hall property, but everything is being looked at, and as this process is schematic design and the next phase is design development, we'll continue to vet out everything and come to the public and look at it. Jeff, you want to talk about the wetlands?
Okay, so first question was the type of drive path. What we're looking at right now is a gravel drive path in parking area. And on this plan, it's shaded in kind of a light brownish color. And I don't know if this works.
I was referring from the school
Okay.
to the property.
Yep. Let me take you there. So that's the gravel all the way up through here, and then there's wetlands in this back area here. We showed at the last public forum kind of an overlay of where the wetlands was and the drive path. And the intent, or at least the early concept, was to look at deck-built bridge construction, which it's basically a timber bridge where they have the equipment stay on the deck and build from the deck as you go. And what that does is it's really posts down into the wetlands, and it really limits the disruption or any disruption to the wetland area if you keep it high enough. And that's the intent for that portion that we would cross, is to try to minimize the impact, almost eliminate the impact if we can to the wetlands. So timber deck built construction. I think at the last presentation we showed some imagery of what that looked like, but that's the plan.
And roughly how far would that go?
So, from memory, it's back up in this area here. I don't know if it's
Somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 150 feet.
yeah, okay, somewhere around that distance. Yeah.
So the distance from the edge of the distance from the edge of the field that exists, the open space right there,
Right here.
to the school is how long?
It's 1,000 feet roughly.
Okay, I thought you just said 100 feet.
The raised.
The raised portion would only be 100 feet.
Right,
Be
the raised
out of
portion.
that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and that would be somewhere in this area.
And then it would go to gravel after that.
Exactly. Yep.
Thank you.
You good? Sure.
Somebody else would like to come up?
My name is Diane Syro, 13 Abbey Road. On
Speak up.
Friday when we met, there was a question about whether or not the referendum to approve the money to build the school included fields on a separate property. At that time, Mr. Dunn, you said that you would agree to give us the written, the attorney's written opinion. Can
I
we
haven't
get,
received that back yet from him.
can we
When I
get
do,
both the bonding counsel and the town attorney?
It would go, well, I sent it to our town attorney first,
Mm-hmm.
and then if he's got a question that he's not sure of, he'll ask me to send it to our bond counsel.
Okay,
But I haven't received that response back yet.
okay.
As soon as we do, we'll send it to you.
And the gentleman that was just talking about the wetlands, do you have a schedule to do an endangered species survey?
You speak to the
As part of this, we did look at the DEP and DDB maps. That's their natural diversity database that they collect on threatened and endangered species. So this was in an area where we're close to one of their polygons on their map. So we did contact them, and we are going through the guidance that they've provided for us. So those studies are being done. They will be submitted back to the DEP, and they will provide us guidance for management practices in regard to that.
Anybody else? Going once?
I still have a question about that area that's there, I'm sorry. I understand, like I said, the need for a 60-foot and 90-foot, because that was part of the plan. The question is, going on over by the 4, is that all parking? Can part of the property, if this goes forward, is part of the property going to remain an open space? That's my question.
Part of the 4, what do you mean?
Well, by the number 4, is that open space still?
That's all open space.
And how far would parking go? Because you'd need more parking than the 7 spots that there are now.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so everything from the 2 skinned-in fields back toward Navy Road is to remain untouched, with the exception of where we have to bring the access drive in, obviously from Navy for emergency services, and parking along there. We did work with BBSA on what do they think an average ball game of Little Leaguers, how much parking, because parking was one of the early concerns that was brought up, that we didn't want overflow to either go onto Navy or people to park on Belden Hill and walk through people's yards. So they told us approximately 20 spaces per field is what they wanted. We still showed the 60 there. Ma'am, this isn't a question and answer. If you have something, please come up to the mic. So we still show the 60 spaces there along that roadway. That could be reduced if Parks and Rec or if BBSA doesn't feel that they need all those spaces. But it's parking equally for use of the walking paths, the use of the open space, as well as for the fields, which is why we kept it at the 60 right now.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Should we more space?
Mark and Jane Road, Rachel Farm Road. Just a quick question. In terms of the bonding from the state, I think they post, if I'm reading correctly, they post on December 15th, their priority list. And then as far as the next steps, what is the timeline if we get, let's say, a priority on the list, and what is the anticipation of the timeline if we don't get it this year? How far back is it just, do you think that'll set the schedule overall? Thank you.
So correct, December 15th on or about. We've done everything, town, everybody's involved in the project has done everything they possibly can to submit the grant application materials. We've met with them numerous times, submitted everything well in advance of the June 30th deadline this year.
State
So
rep has followed up in time as well.
And the state rep has followed up as well. So we're waiting to that time period. We are continuing on our path for schematic design completion towards the end of November. Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong. And then we'll move into design development. So the game plan is the expectation that we'll be placed on that list and continue on with the design phases, moving through design development, construction documents, and preparing ourselves with many different reviews with the state, much more detail than what you see tonight, through the springtime, basically. And then into probably some early summer, where we'll start wrapping up some of the detailed documents. So staying the course right now, as originally presented back in our first public forum, and we'll update the community. The community is going to be the first to understand where they are in that priority list. So.
And then Jeff, after the priority list, the actual round.
So after the priority list, it goes through a series of meetings and appropriations, and then to the legislature in the spring. So sometimes in one year it was mid-spring, early summer. Sometimes it's all the way into the fall. One year, I think it was the year of Colchester, it was all the way into the following year. So the standard time frame is you get on the list on December 15th and you hear spring, late spring-ish the following year, which would be 2020.
So what would you bet?
So summer, fallish area to put this thing out on the street. We're still looking at various different construction delivery methods, which is the key, I think, topic for the NBC looking at right now with the owner's project manager that's now on board. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done between now and then, but the topic in front of them right now is the construction delivery technique and how to advertise or request qualifications for for what would be considered the building.
Mr. Epker at Felton Hill Road. As it stands right now, the Erickson Farm property is open to residents 24, all during the year, weekdays, weekends. If this moves forward as planned here, does this then become off limits to residents during school hours? It wouldn't be?
No, it's a separate property.
Okay.
Willie Johnson, 78 Candlewood Lake Road. At this last meeting, it was my understanding they was going to be looking into determine what the original deed was for open property, and I'm assuming that either that has been done and I missed something or I haven't seen anything on it. And secondly, then I'm seeing where the earlier pass was showing, I think about 40 spaces up near the top of this plan as I'm looking at it. Now I'm seeing 60, so something else has changed in here. So am I missing something, or was there a meeting of some sort that where this did take place, or we did look into the deed and so forth and found out that we can move forward with this? That's the first question.
Thank you.
Steve Dunn, 24 Lindenwood Drive. On the first part, the deed that is on record with the town hall and the town clerk's office specifically mentions ball fields as a use for this space. That's what was written in the deed. That's what was written into the deed. It says including ball fields. So what we're trying to do is be very, very sensitive to everybody's needs here, to the needs of all the residents and also the needs of the residents who live near this property and will be most affected by it. So we're looking at it, we're trying to be sensitive, we're trying to make it work for everybody. And we're going to continue to look at this. I've had meetings with the Matson family on a number of occasions regarding this because they have a very, very strong desire to make sure that this is done in accordance with the wishes of Gert, the lady who owned the property, as well as what's written in the actual deed. The town, when we buy properties, Gursky, Happy Landings, Burr Farm, we look at these, and we also have to look at the intent of the seller, regardless of what's written in the deed. And we're trying to be very sensitive to that, and I can promise you, everyone here is very, very concerned with that. Thank you.
Thank you. More comments, more questions?
Oh, there's a second part of the question about the parking movement. I want to answer that.
Oh,
The parking movement.
Sure. Sorry. Have a seat.
Concerning the second portion, yes, you are correct. Originally, and I think there was a slide earlier, but it was shown, the parking was shown up near where the number 1 is now, roughly, with a straight road, because engineers like straight and less distance because it's cheaper. Right there, where number 4 is now. So what we did after that very first presentation that I believe you also came to, and then since then through the second and through a meeting with the community members as well, is take those items into consideration, such as moving the parking, next slide, lower, where it would have less than an impact on the neighborhood itself, as well as, even though the drive, or I'm going to call it the drive, will be longer, less disruption and less, vehicle, or not that there'd be vehicle traffic, but to the parking behind the residents that live on Belden Hill to the west on this map. And so the number of spaces from 40 to 60, that was also a concern, as was mentioned earlier, about 20 per field. We were still showing 3 fields as of even 5 days ago. And so when it was cut down, we had a brief discussion with our engineers and tech and said, you know what, just leave like this now because we want to make sure that there's enough, as it was addressed earlier, thought being it can always come down, the parking spaces itself, and all the same, you know, we want to make sure that there's enough, that way, say there is, you know, 2 games going on, then residents want to use, you know, the walking path, there's a place for them to park. So call it 40 to 60 to be determined, rough justice.
Marks, 11 Belden Hill Road. I'd like to ask a question that's the flip side of 2 questions back about the space being open to all people at all times because it's a separate property or separate, I think property is the word that came up from the school. The flip side, will school children be on this site during the day, during school days? Does that create any kind of an issue since it's a separate property from the school property? Did that make sense? Did the question make sense?
Just jotting it down
Yeah.
there. And John, talk about programming. Thank you.
Great question, thank you. One of the things we talked about with our physical education director is the use of those fields during the school day when the weather is nice and the kids can come down and use those fields for ball or whatever gross motor activities they're using, whatever programming, and use the fenced-in fields or use them for field days or other activities like that. So they would be used. It wouldn't be used every day. We're not outside every single day, but the fields would be used. Be a nice walk down, and the kids would use that part of the property.
But as a separate property, it isn't an insurance type issue?
I don't think we have an issue there, but those are things that we'll continue to look into. Absolutely.
I'm Shauna Sheck, 1 Belden Hill Road. My question is, I'm kind of new to these meetings, so forgive me if it's kind of it's already been answered, but this seems to be moving very, very quickly. My question is, since it has not been approved 100% to build in this spot, is there an alternative being looked at? Or are you only looking at this spot as a definitive place for this to be built?
So were you looking at the school or the fields?
The fields.
The fields,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, to talk about moving quickly, you know, we've been having these community meetings. I think our first one was in late September. In September. You know, we've tried to, you know, let people know what's going on, when it's going on. There's a lot of information if you want to look up the information, the timeline. There's a lot of information on the new school project website. I would encourage you to go there and we'll explain a lot of the history here behind this. So pre-bond, when this was being developed, we had a single ingress from Candlewood Lake Road, and we had the egress actually going through Erickson Farm. A little bit more, a lot more disturbance. You'd be bringing buses through there. When, you know, some of the meetings that were held during programming with some of our town departments and state departments, national departments, the decision was made to have ingress and egress come off of Candlewood Lake Road. Buses can come in, queue up, parents can come in, queue up. Like Jeff said earlier, they're looking at a turning lane, or actually, I think it's Darren, maybe having a turning lane coming off Candlewood Lake Road. So when those ingress and egress came through the front of the property, it limited the amount of space where the original fields were going to go, to relocating them to the Erickson Farm. As Mr. Dunn said, you know, we're looking at this with particular sensitivity. With this last iteration, what we've tried to do is make them equidistant from properties on Belden Hill and Oak Hollow. We tried to screen them with a natural buffer of trees from those on Belden Hill, and equally the parking from those on Oak Hollow. We really tried to minimize the impact to the site. What we need to do is provide, first and foremost, our school-age children places to play, so we can fulfill our PE program. The question came up regarding, are there other places we've been looking at? And I think this gentleman here had the idea on last Friday, can we look at Wisconsin for that 90-foot field? So, yeah, we were looking at other areas, but what we don't want is a fragmented system. And I think by putting 2 skinned-in fields back-to-back with open outfields at the back of this property affords us the opportunity to maintain character, have a place for our children to play, relocation of that 90-foot field elsewhere where maybe more age appropriate for those children. And, you know, some of the comments we received had to do with a walking trail, much like we have at Cadogan. Because people, you know, said it would be nice to be able to walk through the woods and have this part of our educational program as well. So we've incorporated items such as that since Friday into this plan. It's a moving target. It's a development thing. It's very fluid. But I want, you know, really to resonate that we have been meeting. We've been meeting with the community at large, and we've been listening. And we're trying to be as sensitive as we can, but also meeting the intent and the spirit of the bond, the intent and the spirit of the deed for the Erickson property, and, you know, doing a very delicate dance to try and accommodate all. We know we can't make everybody happy, and nobody will be happy with any of the solutions. It's always a tough position, but we're trying to be as accommodating as we can as a town for the best interest of the town at large. And I think that's really what the spirit of community is. So thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
My name is Cheryl Boyd, 93 Candlewood Lake Road, Brookfield, Connecticut. Can you speak right? I'm just a little confused. The very first site plan, there was one driveway into into Huckleberry, and then the road across Erickson Farm. When that was taken away, you put 2 roads or 2 driveways into Huckleberry and then out. So what is the need for this emergency road now that you have 2 ways in and 2 ways out on the property?
Jeff?
So in addition to some of the other explanations already, to address your question specifically, safety. We have an ingress and egress out on the Huckleberry Hill site to Candlewood Lake Road. The alternate path here, that's a safety path. It's as we have presented at the previous public forums. It's an alternative path to allow first responders to get to different parts of the building. Now, so during this process, when we started this master plan, gosh, nearly a couple years ago now, part of the grant application is we had representatives from the state Homeland Security come in, look at all of your school sites, and particularly this site as well, and comment and look at our conceptual plan. And while it's not a code that I can show you in black and white, their recommendations were to provide alternate routes to get to the site, to the building. I understand your point where we showed 1 in and 1 out and another one at Nevy Road, but my answer is safety, security, and we were asked to involve kind of experts that are known. They came in, they spent a lot of time in this town. They spent a few days here looking at buildings and site, and we're just trying to respond to some of their recommendations. So that's why we show it.
My second question is, I was wondering if we could possibly set up a meeting with people who are interested in preserving Erickson Farm and Steve Harden, the Baseball Association president, because I just had a conversation with him about a half an hour before this meeting started, and he has a lot of good ideas. I don't really feel comfortable speaking for him, but I think that it would be important for us to hear what he has to say and for you guys to hear what he told me tonight about his ideas on open space.
Can I get that? Sure, right in.
I met with Steve Harding, his director of baseball operations, and another gentleman, I don't know what he did for BBSA, on Friday, and asked him to join this meeting and come explain the needs of the Brookfield Baseball and Softball Association. He told me on Friday he was going to be here. I think it's important that we hear from all the parties. So I agree with you. I'd love for him to come and explain what the needs are for the baseball people and softball people. Yeah, okay.
And Steve, I'm just gonna add to that. I'm just going to add to that. I spoke with Steve Harding Sr. on Friday. I spoke with him yesterday, and I spoke with him today. He's been an integral part of our planning and what we've been trying to do, again, with our director of athletics, is get agreement from all parties that what we're presenting is sufficient and meets their needs. So, yeah, I think meeting with Steve Harding would be, fruitful for all of us. But again, we haven't been doing this in a bubble. We've actually spoken with Steve 3 times in 3 days, and he's seen some of this. So, I'm taking a little bit back to say.
Would you feel comfortable if I told you what he shared with me?
Absolutely, please do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He shared with me that baseball fields are going to be more intrusive than you think they will be, that he would like he would like 2 fields to be built in Brookfield. He would really rather not upset residents of the area, and he would like to keep open space.
Okay. Thank you for relaying that.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Going once? Going twice? I want to thank everyone again for coming here this evening then. Truly, this, as you know, over a period of 3 public engagement forums, this is further definement of plans, and it is a response to all of the input that we get from the community that we are able to do this. So thank you again. If anyone has any other email, please feel free. We still have our email open. It's newschoolproject.org. I'm sorry. newschoolproject@brookfieldps.org. Apologize. And we would love to hear from you all, continuing to do so. Anything else? So without objection, the Board of Ed meeting is adjourned.